The phosphites, in other words, products like Phostrol or Confined Extra or Rampart are really the three that we have to work with. As you know, they're really good products for managing pink rot and late blight, especially the tuber phase. They're really highly systemic, so when you apply them foliarly, they will move right down to the tubers, which is an advantage if you're looking at protecting that tuber from disease, from infection, and going into storage with that protection is really advantageous. But some of the challenges with the product is, there is some phytotoxicity that we notice, so some burning if it's applied, especially later in the season with drier conditions, warmer conditions. Sometimes as the plant's aging a bit, there's a little more stress and you do see some more burning. Some varieties are more susceptible to that than others, especially like Dakota russets we notice really are susceptible to burning with that product, and is like the others. So there's differences that way. But the other question that we've often had too is, can we use this seed crops? Right now there's some caution around that, and that really started back in 2011 when we noticed that tubers from plants that had received foliar phosphite had some delays in their emergence. Usually they'd catch up, but it was just our first evidence that, well, we might have to be a little cautious on seed because it is systemic, it is loading into those tubers, and maybe it's having some physiological impacts too. Khalil did some work a number of years ago where he applied post-harvest, which is another form of application of these products, and you can see as you increase the rate, you're definitely increasing the suppression of the sprouting. Usually, like I said, under normal situations, the plants will catch up, but we have noticed some yield reductions in some cases. So Darren Gibson in Manitoba here runs Gaia Consulting. This is some trial work that he did a few years ago now, but comparing a check there with some different phosphite treatments. And you can see there 19 days after planting, that first column, there's a lot of delays compared to the check. By about 26 days after planting, there's no significant difference. So the plants tend to catch up, but there may be an impact there. And sometimes he noticed that there has been a bit of a yield suppression in some cases, usually with the higher rates. So you're kind of playing a balance here between getting a rate high enough to get good disease suppression, but then not impacting in your yields. So because there's some questions around this, we are doing trials, and now this is the first year, where we look at a bunch of different varieties and see whether we see any yield impacts if we use them as seed. So the first year we did this, we applied the product foliarly in 2023, typically 3 apps of Confined Extra at 2.3 liters per acre. We usually target around 7 liters per acre as a seasonal total to get decent disease suppression. And in this particular trial, which we planted out this last summer in 24, so we used the seed from those plants that were treated in 23, planted them in 24, and any of those varieties we didn't see any yield impacts. But I have to qualify that because each year is a bit different as to how much phosphate actually loads into those tubers based on the environment and so on. Ideally, I'd have some phosphite testing of those tubers. That's expensive, so what we do is inoculate them with pink rot and get a kind of bioassay that way to see how much product is in the tubers. And so I will have that data to sort of correlate with this yield data. But no yield impact this first year. We're going to do it again next year and just see whether we get some impact. So right now I'd still say caution is the word. Seems to be something that shows up intermittently. But I mean, do you really want to risk it? Because there are some other options for pink rot. You have Aranda's Gold's pretty good in furrow. We've seen fairly good results with that. And one approach might be to use that and then maybe a couple of phosphate applications before the risk gets higher for burning and other effects. That combo approach has been pretty successful too. So.
Positioning from Darren's data on that
Yeah.
last slide on the
Yep.
yield side
Mhm.
was when he compared the post-harvest treatment. Like, there's not really much difference on using the post-harvest versus the untreated check. And so for seed,
Yeah,
you may want to say, okay, maybe it's not, maybe getting it into the tubers, there might be a yield drag and maybe we don't want to do that. But
Right.
if we were, like, say, it was a year where you're worried about pink rot, or heaven forfend, if you're worried about late blight again and carrying late blight in seed, if it was 10 hundredweight or something like that, you might trade that for the post-harvest treatment to make sure it wasn't spread in your pile or something.
that's a good point. Because the post-harvest is fantastic at killing spores on the surface, 100% effective. But it can't deal with any infections that have happened in the field, either through the stolon or through the eyes before harvest. So that's really the advantage of the foliar, is you will get those in-field infections.
Yeah.
But the post-harvest is great in a year that's, moist, a lot of soil around the tubers, say, some wounding maybe at harvest, and the post-harvest spray is great at killing spores that might infect at that time.
Any other comments on that? Questions for Rick?
If you're talking about using it on seed potatoes, the label on Confine Extra specifically says it's not recommended for use on seed.
Right.
They don't really explain why, but
Why is because we warned them.
It's based on mostly pre-EI research.
But I guess there's enough interest still, because of the value of it, that we're trying to tease that out a bit. Whether we can ever get enough confidence, that's the challenge, right? So.
And we may end up with the same recommendation, right? Like, if the recommendation may not change, but it's just worth kind of teasing it out a little bit. Like, once you guys saw that at first, it was kind of like, okay, whoa, and then don't do a lot more to follow it up, because I think you're just, like, everybody rightly being cautious.
Exactly.
And now it's just about, okay, well, like, let's try and tease it a little bit, and could it be variety dependent or other things?
And at first, when we noticed that the Americans didn't have it on their radar, so they're going, what are you talking about, right? But then, as years went by, they started to see it too, so. And the varieties responsive differently, that's why we have so many different varieties in the trial. Like, there's really different responses from varieties to this product, so that's worth teasing out. Maybe there's some that, you're much more comfortable working with than others, if you need to use this, or want to use this.
And there was a period in 17, 18, 19, 20 when there wasn't a lot of phos acid being used, because we had a lot of dry summers and we weren't seeing any blight, and
No.
it wasn't getting used. And now the last few years there's been a lot more phos acid use, so it's about, just again, what's the best way to use that chemical and stuff. So. Any other questions, comments before we wrap her up? So, Rebecca asked for a minute of your attention just to talk to you a little bit about semen availability.
Oh, sure.